Hello, this is Kathy Toso, and I am going to help you figure out how to write your first offer. I help a lot of people. Every offer is different. So, one of the main things you have to do is review the MLS and make sure that you are making sure that you're hitting all the points that are in the MLS. You want to make sure that if it's like on a septic tank or things like that, that you're asking for a termite report, that you're verifying that the type of financing your client has is the same kind of financing that's offered on the MLS. And if there's questions, of course, reach out to the listing agent. What I'm finding a lot lately is that people who are just really into technology. They're not even letting agents know that they're writing an offer. They don't call for questions. They don't try to see what the seller really wants. Back in the day when we used to have to write everything in quadruplicates or whatever the 5 triplicates is, we had to ask a lot of questions because, you filled those things out in handwriting, and it was kind of a pain to change it and stuff like that. So I really do recommend that if you're writing an offer, let another agent know, ask them if they have other offers. You can always ask them, what do you need to be competitive? Some agents feel that it's in their client's best interest to let people know what the other offers are at so that they can drive up the price. Some agents feel that it's unfair, and they feel like it doesn't really help because it's better for people to have to kind of guess and write, maybe they'll write 20,000 off or over, but if you tell them you already have offers at 410, they might only write 415. So everyone has their marketing strategy. So different agents will give you different information. Don't feel bad if they say, no, we don't share that information in our office, or my client prefers me not to share that information. It kind of just depends on each individual marketing strategy. So if something's written in the MLS, like, hey, the property comes with X, Y, or Z, write that in the offer. Don't forget to write those things down, because if it's not in the offer, it is not included. The MLS does not become part of the contract. It's just an advertising thing. And anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you. I already logged into my car.org, which is where you find your forms. And when I open up mine, let me hang on a second here. So hopefully you see my screen. This is my CAR. And I went into the transaction part, and you can see these are the other transactions I have going on right now. If I want to start a new transaction, I'm going to hit the button up here that says new. Right here it says new, and this is going to be a new purchase. I'm going to write down the name of the property, which is here on my cell phone. Let's see, I also have, I think, in here too. I have to move stuff around to see everything I'm looking at. I've been pulling up a lot of properties today for my client. I already looked at this property earlier, so I know the information about it. But you're going to get the information off of the MLS here. 394 East Street, Jacinto. I'm just going to copy and paste that. Right. I'm the address of the property up here. And then I can copy it down here. And make sure I'm still sharing my screen with you. So we copied the address off the MLS here. We're putting it in here so that this is going to start our new transaction. It's a residential property. It's not industrial or condo or any of these other choices. And then I just hit save. And so now it's going to create a new transaction over here. on my screen. Okay. Then I go to this place up here on the right. It says all forms. And you can put in purchase agreement. Like if I type in purchase agreement, it's going to bring up all the different things that have the word purchase agreement in it. Over time, you start realizing like this is called an RPA, residential purchase agreement. So each document has, like this is an APSPA. It's an already built subdivision purchase agreement. So each one of these, here shows RPA again. So each one of these has like their own little acronyms. So like people use it all the time. They'll say, I need your RPA, or I need your ABA, or I need this, or I need that. So you can either put in the type of document you want. You can put RPA and it'll just bring up residential purchase agreements. You can put it in, let's say, tenant, and it brings up documents you might need for tenants. If you have a lease, you can just write the word lease, and it brings up some different things you might need for a lease. So you can search it like by the word, or you can search it by the acronym. So I'm just going to the RPA. I'm going to open that. That's the main document I need right now. So I'm writing an offer for my client. Of course, make sure your client is already pre-approved and you've already spoken to a lender. So you know how much money they have in the bank and things like that, because these are all things that the buyer's agent's this listing agent's gonna ask for. Okay, so we're gonna open this in the form editor. That's why I prefer to open it. The first document we always get, and I'm going to explain this, is called the agency disclosure. And basically all this agency disclosure is telling your client is, hey, I'm Kathy Toso. I work with eXp Realty and I'm going to be representing you. My highest fiduciary, the highest good faith I can have is for you. You are my client. This turns you from a customer into a client. And so basically I am supposed to put your needs above my own. Whoever you have a fiduciary with, it should either be a principal in a transaction, the buyer or the seller. It's never the broker or anything like that. So this is for my buyer. Take a second sometime. Okay. This is eXp's license number. It comes up. Every broker has its own license number, so you're gonna have to search it up. Let's see. And then I put my number here. Computer's just running super slow. Mine comes up too. All right. This second page talks about the importance of confirming agency relationships. The seller needs to know who's representing whom in the transaction as they're paying commission, right? And if they're paying the commission all to eXp, like if this was an eXp agent and I'm an eXp agent, that means that eXp is making both sides of the transaction. But if there's like a Remax agent on the other side, then it means that that money is being split between two different brokerage firms. So this really explains the importance of confirming agency, which we will do when we get to the purchase agreement. This is a fair housing and discrimination advisory. This basically says that we are not allowed to discriminate against age, citizenship, medical conditions, sexual orientation, immigration status, disability, mental and physical, gender identity, gender expression, primary language, genetic information, marital status, military or veteran status, criminal history, familial status, source of income, so where you're getting your money from, or any arbitrary characteristics. So we're just not allowed as real estate agents to discriminate in any way, shape, or form. We are an equal housing opportunity. That's what the sign down here means. It's a house with an equal sign on it. So these are just things we can't do. We can't inquire about certain specific things about people. I go and see if I have the seller's information in here. So if in the MLS, they put the seller's information for me, I can go in there and check. Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and look up the seller in title. It's really not giving me that information. So I'm gonna open up a new tab here. I go to what for the shoot. Title agent login. So I can look up who the owner of the property is. I have to like always check my notes here. Them. And then I'm going to put the address of the property in, which I should be able to still paste it in there. And I can do my search. If you need help with this step, this could be another video, I guess. I don't know if you can see all this or not. Oh, it's Solon Eva Garcia. So I'm going to go back into my form. Down here. Oh, I gotta change X. I want all those weird capitalizations. What's nice about it is once I put these people's information in, it auto-populates to all the other fields. So I don't have to like worry about that. Right? These are going to end up being signature lines for people. Okay, this lets people know that we are allowed to represent more than one buyer or seller at a time, that when we're working as agents, we aren't just working for one person at a time, or we wouldn't really make a lot of money. So it does let people know that like I could have two buyers writing offers on the same property. I could have a listing in a neighborhood and get the listing across the street. And for some weird reason, the across the street listing sells first. It's not because I tried to sell it first or because it was listed for more. I worked harder at selling it first. It could just be that, you know, the way their house presented, or it smelled better, or there was just some aesthetic, or something the buyers liked about the other house better. So it just reminds people that we are allowed to work with more than one person at a time. This is where I put the seller's brokerage information in. So all this other information just sort of like popped in, but now we're going to put the seller's broker's information, which I got to go back to that. MLS listing. It's called Honest Realty Group. And her name is Melita Sanchez. So we're going to do that. Nest, H-O-N-E-S-T, Realty Group. And then we're going to put in Melita, M-E-L-I-A. And then we're going to get their information. I always feel like the easier you can make it for the other agent when you're writing an offer on their property, the better. So the more information you can fill in for them, it just makes their life a little bit easier. So I always try to do that so that people really enjoy working with me, because I kind of do the extra things. The same. She must be the broker of the company. That's cool. So we're just gonna copy and paste that in here. Go. And we'll paste it in here. My computer's just running really slow today, probably because I have so many tabs open. I just have to have more patience. That's what God is telling me. Daddy Toso, we need to have a little more patience. Okay. All right, so the wire fraud advisory advises people that they should not just wire funds to escrow. Even if they get an email from escrow saying, hey, you need to wire your funds, they need to call escrow and make sure that they call to make sure, because there's so many scammers out there that make it look like it's exactly from the escrow company, and people have been known to wire their money to the wrong place because the numbers weren't the correct escrow numbers. So we just remind people that anytime they're doing any kind of a wire transfer, they should always double check, call the escrow company, verify the numbers, verify they sent them an email, because obviously people oftentimes are wiring huge amounts of money back and forth in an escrow, in a transaction of this nature. So we just want to make sure that everyone is aware that people can scam and try to take your money, and we don't want to support people in that. Notice things are just kind of auto-populating. So today we're preparing this today on October 14th. I'm gonna go grab the parcel number off of the thing. So San Jacinto is in Riverside County. Oops, didn't do that. We got to put in Riverside County here. So then we're going to grab the APN number off of the MLS sheet, which I believe I had already highlighted it. Let's see. It's usually towards the top of the page. It's right there. So I'm going to select it, copy it, come back to our document, pop it in there. Okay. Okay, so now Honest Realty Group is representing the seller. So this is where that agency confirmation comes in. And eXp Realty is representing only the buyer. If it was eXp and eXp, even though we were two different people in the same company, we would say eXp was representing both the buyer and the seller, and that's called a dual agency. Hang on a second. Sorry, I'm getting some text. Let's check. Okay. We're going to offer $390 on this house. This house was actually already in escrow. It was an FHA. It fell out. So we know that it already qualifies for an FHA loan. It's already appraised at this $390,000 price. So we know that will also be accepted price-wise by the bank. Of course, we might have some different contingencies on our offer than the original one, but hopefully the seller will accept our offer. Okay, we put in the price. I don't like doing days after acceptance. I like to actually specifically select a day to close. I like to close on a Wednesday. I never like closing at the last Wednesday of the month because it seems like okay, next month If we tried to close around this week, this Thanksgiving week, the 22nd, 23rd, that's going to be a really hard week to close an escrow because people are off, they're celebrating with family. So I would like to have us close the week after that, probably like on the 28th. I generally don't like closing the last week of the month, but a lot of people will be taking off. And if we try to close on the 15th, it's just going to be too tight of a time frame. So if we close on a Tuesday or Wednesday, it gives time in case there isn't a mistake with what funds getting wired incorrectly or something coming, some issue coming up with the loan. We still have an opportunity to try to fix it that week before we close and have the buyer move in on the weekend. Oftentimes sellers want like a close of escrow plus 2 or 3 days. In this situation, this property is already vacant, so we don't really need to worry about that. So we picked our closing date. The offer automatically expires within 3 days after our signatures. The initial deposit, we're just going to put down like probably $4,000. The loan amount, he's going to put 3.5% down, so we have to figure that out. So I have to figure out what that is. I'm going to go on my calculator and I'm going to hit 390 minus 3.5%. And it's going to give me a number. So this is 376,350. That's that easy. Just, you don't really have to know how to do math. Just whatever the amount that they're putting down, you're going to minus that because that's what the loan amount's going to be. We're going to get an FHA loan. And when I click this button, it's going to attach an extra document to our contract. You can see that little circle going. It's going to fix that. So this is saying if FHA is checked, we have to give the seller a list of lender required repairs within 17 days. In this situation, we already know it went FHA. If there's any additional amounts financed, like if let's say someone's getting one of those special programs where they have more financing on their property due to some special program that they qualify for. Back in the day, some people did like 80-10-10 loans where you get 80% from your first, a 10% second, and then 10% was your own money. Okay. There's no finance. We can put in the interest rate. So interest rate not to exceed, we can put like 7%. And then you have to only pay up to 1 point to buy the loan. Now the next page, so this is where the buyers and sellers are going to initial the page. The seller credit, if any, we're going to ask our seller for a credit. Then again, we're going to go back to our handy dandy math. We're going to ask for $11,700 for our closing costs. If there was any additional financing terms, like if we were asking for credit for something else, we'd want to put it in there. If we were getting a hard money loan, if somebody was gifting us money, like we're getting our 3.5% down as a gift funds from our grandparents or something like that, we would note those things in this other financing terms. In other words, if grandma and grandpa decided they didn't want to give the gift funds, that would be a contingency to get out of the contract. Basically, the first page of the contract says, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I really like your house. Here's who I'm working with. We really want to buy it. Here's my earnest money deposit. This is what I'm willing to pay. This is how quickly I'd like to close. All the other pages start becoming what they call contingencies or reasons to back out. So if the seller doesn't want to give us our $11,700, we could back out of the contract. Let's say grandma and grandpa needed to give us so much money to buy the house and they change their mind and don't give it to us. That would be a reason to back out of the contract. If there was a seller broker agreement, this was found in an MLS that I belong to. I don't really have to check this box. Verification of all cash funds. We're not doing an all cash offer. Verification down payment closing account. We'll say we'll have that within 3 business days. Loan verification of loan application attached to the offer. We have a pre-approval letter. We're going to check that box because that's what we have. We have 5 days prior to the close of escrow to walk through the property to make sure what we bought is what it is. All property in California is sold in its as-is condition. So first off, subject to our inspection rights, which means we have the right to find out what as is. So all houses are sold as is in California, and then we have the right to go out as a buyer, walk through and decide what as is because we can't see everything. That's why we hire a physical inspector, goes through and checks, you know, the cabinets and the heating and the air conditioning, and they check the outlets and the toilets and the sinks. If it's coming with appliances, they may check the dishwasher and things of that nature. Okay. And then 5 days prior to close, we go back and we just make sure everything still looks the way it did the day we bought it. Because sometimes a property can get vandalized. There could be a storm that, you know, rips shingles off the roof or something like that. And of course, we don't, it's not a reason to not buy the property, but we need to let the seller know, hey, you got to get this back into what it was the day we saw it, because this isn't the same. 17 days after, if we want to assign it to somebody else, let's say we're buying the property, but then it turns out we can't buy it, but our mom can buy it for us, we can assign it to her. But we have to do that within the first 17 days. And basically she's just jumping right in where we are. So if we've already signed documents to a certain point to say we've removed contingencies and stuff, and then mom jumps in as an assignment, like they've just got to keep going from where we're at. It doesn't start the time frame is over. When there's a loan, they want to make sure you have approval within 17 days of acceptance, which means they want to have the appraisal done and all the other things. 17 days in this market right now is a little bit dicey. It seems like appraisals are able to get out there pretty quickly right now, but in a super hot market, the appraisers are so busy, sometimes they can't even get out there till 20 days. Based on the appraisal value at a minimum purchase price of So this just says that the appraisal has to come in at least 390 or more. We actually know that the appraisal already came in at that. FHA appraisals stick around for a little while. We have 17 days to investigate the property. That means we can bring in our home inspector, and then if he recommends a chimney inspection, we can bring in the chimney inspection. But after 17 days, all of our inspections should be done. We can have informational access to the property for 17 days. So if there's other things that we need to check out, we can get back in the property up to 17 days. It's not a contingency for the informational access to the property. Like it's for you to get information. Let's say you get your physical inspection done and then you just want more information about what it's going to cost a contractor. That's not a reason to back out of the contract at that point. Review of seller documents. The seller is going to send us a bunch of disclosures we have to sign. I always tell people writing an offer or getting an acceptance is like a hurry up, wait, and hurry up situation. At the beginning, we're writing our offer. They're getting back to us. There's paper going back and forth. After we have an agreement, then all of a sudden there's escrow documents going back and forth. There's disclosures going back and forth. And that's like the first week or two. And then there's this like silent period in the middle. And it's like, what's happening? And it feels like nothing's happening. But what's happening is your loan went to underwriting, and the underwriter makes sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, and that your loan would be saleable in a secondary market. So they're making sure that everything is like in order so they can sell your loan down the road. So during that quiet period, stuff's happening. It's just stuff we don't have control over. And then at the end, there's a list of conditions in order to get the loan. And some things are simple things like we need a better copy of your driver's license. We need to call your employer to verify you still have employment, things like that. And then other things are trickier, like, oh, we need you to pay off this debt, or we need you to take care of this. When it gets to the position of somebody needing to do like those types of things, and somebody says, oh, we have loan approval, I always ask, I want to see the conditions list, because I want to know what the conditions are for my client to see if they're simple things or if they're a little bit more complicated. That would alert us to needing an extension or something like that. And sometimes it's just not doable. Like it's like, oh, you need to pay $10,000 off on your car. Well, I don't have $10,000 to pay on my car, so we have to always look at things like that. Let's see. They're going to give us a preliminary title report, which just shows if there's any liens or anything against the property. It'll show us if there's any easements, encroachments, things of that nature. It's going to show us a plot map, which kind of gives us like these squiggly lines we look at, and it tells us like if there's certain parts of the property we really can't use, they wouldn't be functional to us. So in other words, if you're thinking, oh yeah, I'm going to put a pool here, there could be a squiggly line there that says, wait a second, you might not be able to put a pool there. And these are the types of things you'd want to go over with your well-educated real estate agent. If there's any kind of solar panels or hero program or some sort of upgrade that the seller did to the house and they were able to get it for free, but it went on their property taxes. We need to get all the information for that because sometimes the buyer has to assume that, and that can kind of change things. If there's a solar panel lease and the buyer needs to assume it, they might qualify for the loan for the house, but once they have to pay like an additional 200 or 300 for a solar lease, it could put them out of the market for that particular property. So those are reasons that we would back out of the transaction. We're going to just allow the time of possession in this particular situation to be time of recording because it's a vacant property. But if it was an occupied property, oftentimes in the MLS, the seller says, I want close of escrow plus 3 days to move because they need the money out of the escrow and then they need to get the moving company out and then they're going to pay the moving company. So sometimes you have to look at the MLS and see what the seller is requesting. Of course, it's negotiable. But it's easier when we kind of comply with what they need if you want to get your offer accepted. If the seller was going to occupy the property or if there was tenant occupied properties, this would have to come into play. Occupied by tenants, if there's a tenant occupied property, we have to click the spot and say, okay, they're staying in the property for how many days. The seller has 7 days after acceptance to give us our documents for our review. So everything they know to be wrong with the property, there's documents for them to fill out. We have a chance to review those and get them back. They have 5 days to get us all the signed escrow instructions and things like that so we can sign them. And we have also the 5 days. Escrow sends us a bunch of documents. We have 5 days. Time to pay fees according to HOA for ordering HOA documents. They have 3 days to do that. So if it's in a homeowners association, within 3 days, the seller is supposed to order those documents. They have 7 days to install smoke alarms, carbon monoxide detectors, and do the water heater bracing. These are things you want to make sure are done so that there's not an issue with the appraisal, because if any one of those 3 things aren't done, the appraiser has to go back out, and then it would be a seller's, I don't know, but it's a seller's, it would be the buyer would have to pay the appraiser to go back out to the property. So we always try to avoid having reasons for the appraiser to have to go to check things that should have been done already. Things that are included or excluded in the sale. These would things I could check off of the MLS. So I can go through the MLS quick and see what's coming with it. It really doesn't say that it comes with anything. This is a very, like, the MLS is very, very limited. So we're just not going to check anything. It doesn't look like it has a refrigerator in the picture. I don't know if I couldn't really see where the stove is either. So let's see. We're not going to check any of these. There's nothing really excluded. We're asking the seller to pay for a natural hazard zone disclosure report. It tells the buyer if they're in a flood zone, a fire zone, an earthquake zone, and things of that nature. It's important for the buyer to know that. It asks us to select the service provider. Okay, if there's any other reports that we wanted. Smoke alarms, carbon monoxide detectors, that we'd ask the seller to pay for that, generally speaking. Government point of sale required inspections, we'd ask the seller to pay for those. The city of LA requires like a 9A report that says that you have low flow water, like things like water, like low flow toilets and, water saving devices on your showers and sinks and things like that. So that would be a seller item. If there was any other point of sale items, we would say the buyer and seller to pay each their own. In our transaction, we asked for credit for $11,700. And um, oh, In this section, normally I don't put seller's choice, but sometimes I do because in this situation, we're a little bit further out of the area. So we're out of the area a little bit, so we're gonna let them choose the escrow company. No, seller pays that. The owner's a title insurance policy. Generally, the buyer pays for title insurance to cover the bank, and the seller pays for the title insurance to cover the buyer. So you can see that we check seller here, and then the buyer's one already has the buyer in there. The county transfer tax is usually the seller responsibility. City transfer tax is a seller's responsibility. This property is not in an HOA, so we don't have to worry about who pays for the what, but normally HOA transfer fees are paid by the seller. Went down a little too far. If there's private transfer fees, again, if there's like a private stock in a water company or whatever, those will be transferred through the seller as well. Home warranty, we definitely want the seller to pay for a home warranty. I would normally put about $500 on here. If there was any other terms to the transaction, seller states they're gonna like put in the roof once we remove our contingencies and stuff like that, we would put there on there. Okay, we're gonna do all these things once we get our formal loan approval. This isn't, and there's all, these are all the special addendums that you might need in this particular situation. This is a typical home, but if there was a tenant occupied a property or a probate or a manufactured home, or if there was some sort of a tenancy in common purchase addendum, if there was a stock co-op for water or whatever, if there was a mixed use purchase agreement, if we were writing an offer that was only going to be considered as a backup offer. Oh, I don't want to just go so fast because normally just this basically talks about the initial deposit will be delivered to the escrow holder within 3 days of them accepting our offer. If we were going to put in an increased deposit, that would have to be sent in the same way. The seller basically needs to understand that this becomes the seller's money. The buyer's money becomes the seller's money because it's part of the earnest money deposit. And once the money is in escrow, it takes 2 people to release it back to the buyer. Not just the buyer can't just go and demand their money back. Because theirs is a contract and both people have to perform on it. It lets you know that it's an FHA loan. It'll provide for conventional financing unless you click the FHA button. So it's just reiterating that if you didn't click a button up above, that means that you're going conventional. So we want to make sure we're specifying the things we want. If there was an additional amount financed, you have to understand that you have to note that. You can't just add that in later and try to make it seem like you're putting more money down today and then putting less down tomorrow. So the balance of the purchase price, including all cash funds needed to deposit with the escrow holder pursuant to the escrow holder's instructions. In other words, their first time you can maybe write like a regular check to deposit your money, or you can do like a wire transfer to deposit your money. But for sure at the end, you definitely need to wire the money because they need to make sure it's in their account before you can get the rest of the money from the title company to pay for the house and then to like record the lien on the property for your new loan. There are limits on the credit to buyers. So even though we ask for $11,700, the lender may only allow us to get $9,000. That extra money doesn't go to the buyer. It just reduces what the seller's credit is. Just depends on what the lender allows. Basically, it's saying that we have to like verify our down payment and closing costs. In other words, they're going to want to see some sort of document showing that the buyer has the money in the bank to pay for all this stuff. Basically, it says if you're getting a loan based on a certain type of financing, you have to comply with that financing. It's not saying you can't change the financing, but you have to get the seller's permission if you're going to change it. If like FHA requires owner occupancy, so you have to make sure that if you're buying it with a owner occupancy, if you're buying like let's say like a duplex or something, you have to let the seller know within 3 days of acceptance, like which unit you want them to vacate if they need to remove a tenant for you. The condition is sold as is in its present physical condition as of the date of sale of the property, including this pool spa, and it tells you all the things, and everything has to be substantially the same. The buyer is strongly advised to conduct investigations of the entire property in order to determine its present condition. So it's sold in its present physical condition, subject to our inspection rights. So basically in the first 17 days, you can almost back out for any reason. I mean, you don't want to go in with that idea, but you definitely like anything you investigate that doesn't come up to your satisfaction, pretty much there's a huge list of things you can investigate. So it just says that this is not close of escrow, anything that's assignable for warranty items and things like that. Let's say you had a roof that had a 10-year warranty and you just had it put on, like in this transaction, you're going to have it put on at the end. You need to understand that. This property, if you're getting an appraisal, what that means, and just kind of explains the appraisal process. They bring up the investigation of the property as part of it. Part of your investigation is making sure you can get hazard insurance in the area, because some places aren't being covered as easily with hazard insurance right now. If it's a condominium, there's a whole big book of CC&Rs. So it's probably like a 200-page book or sometimes bigger of all the rules and regulations of the condo. You have time to review that and decide, oh geez, if they only allow a 15-pound dog and I have a 50-pound dog, this might not be the condo for me because I don't want to get rid of my dog, If it only allows you to have one pet and you have two. So you have to read those types of documents that come for you, and make sure you're going through all of that. Once you remove your contingencies on that 17th day, it means that you're actually removing them. Like no one's forcing you to remove them. I never recommend removing a contingency you're not comfortable removing. You can always ask for an extension. The seller can always say no, because this contract is a contract that you signed at the beginning and you're supposed to perform on this contract. Now, sometimes things come up and we need extensions, and oftentimes sellers are pretty good about giving an extension, but the reality of it is they don't have to. So you have to be clear about making sure you're doing everything using your due diligence to get done in the timeframes that are specified in the contract. And usually escrow keeps you on track. Your agent should keep you on track. If there's anything included in the sale, you need to write it down. If it was talked about or in the MLS, it doesn't count, and it talks about the things that are generally included. And then it talks about the things that would be excluded from the sale. If there's any leased or liened items, the seller has to disclose to the buyer what items those are, because that could affect the sale. If there's anything excluded, that's not going to remain on the property, it has to be provided for. So it says, unless otherwise stated, brackets attached to walls, floors, or ceilings for any such component, furniture, item will be removed, and holes or other damage shall be repaired but not painted. So in other words, if the seller removes something that was like braced or whatever against the wall, they have to remove the bracket and they have to fill the holes, but they don't have to paint the wall. Basically, it just says who's paying for what, inspections and whatnot. There is an opportunity for the buyer, even if this house is sold as is, the buyer has the right to request repairs on a form called an RR. And then the seller has the right to respond in an RR, like the seller's response. I think it's called an RRRR, not sure. But anyways, it goes back and forth with requests for repairs. The home warranty is chosen usually by one of the parties. I put in the person that I generally use. And if there's anything broken with the property, like anything breaks on the property, the home warranty covers a lot of things and it saves the seller. It kind of ensures the seller's not going to get calls from the buyer saying this broke, that broke. And it allows the buyer like to kind of just have like a $75 fee when something happens and they have like an 800 number to call and someone comes out to fix it for them and or replace it if it's not fixable. Of course, that there's small print on all of those documents, which we recommend reading so that you're seeing the things that are and are not covered in your home warranty plan. But a lot of buyers forget once they buy the property, they pay other contractors to come out to fix stuff. And the reality of it is they should have just called the home warranty plan. A transfer disclosure statement is required. A seller has to give a buyer a transfer disclosure statement and as well as a seller's property questionnaire. They're about 7 pages together of documentation that the seller literally goes item by item and tells you what's working and what they feel like is not working in the property. And then as agents, we also do what they call an agent visual inspection disclosure. And we tell the buyer what we think is wrong with the property or the things we see that are wrong with the property. It's specifically to find defects, not things like, oh, everything looks great or normal wear and tear. Everyone's idea of what normal wear and tear is different. So we need to be very specific, like stained ceiling. We don't say if it's a roof, we don't say if it's a roof leak. We don't say if it's an air conditioning leak. We just say stains on ceiling, cracks in ceiling, cracks in sidewalk, so that we're pointing out the things that could be defective on the property for our buyer. Talks about withholding taxes. There's just a lot of, there talks about the natural hazardous environmental things, condominium disclosures, solar power systems, and what those things mean. It talks again about the buyer's investigation of property and matters affecting the property. So they kind of give you like a list of things to check out. Title investing, it reminds a buyer that how they hold title has significant tax and legal consequences. We are not attorneys. We aren't able to give them any advice. They need to talk to their tax man or their attorney as to how they really should hold title based on their family situation. They should not assume that just because they're married, they should hold it as community property with rights to survivorship because they might have a situation that's not really the best interest of their kids if they do that. So they should really talk to their tax man and say, how should we hold title? We don't give that advice. Time frames, this just talks about the time frames and that this is a, you know, we both have to be working towards staying on the time frames. You know, both parties have a right to give each other a notice to perform if they aren't performing and then to request that we cancel the transaction if we're not doing our part. It takes both parties to cancel the transaction, generally speaking. It talks about when the seller can cancel and when the buyer has a right to cancel. So it goes into some details about that. We have to give each other a notice to perform before we ask to cancel. So we have to give somebody a right to perform, like on that 17-day contingency to like do your investigations and remove all your contingencies. On day 15, they can send us a notice to remove contingencies. They can send it 2 days before it's actually due. And then if we don't do it, then they can send us a notice to perform. But basically we just want to stay on track with our timeframes as best as possible. This lets people know that if there are any repairs done by the seller, they have to be in a workmanlike manner, but they can be done directly by the seller. That we have the right to walk through the property 5 days prior to make sure the property condition is what was agreed to. That each party pays for the prorations of property taxes and like HOA dues and things like that based on the days they're living in the property. This talks about the scope of duty for us as agents and how our compensation works. These are joint escrow instructions. Back in the day, escrow used to type up a whole document that basically repeated everything in the contract, and sometimes there were typos. Now they just incorporate the contract into the escrow instructions so that everyone's aware that the original contract is part of it. It reminds people that the MLS sometimes isn't accurate, and sometimes even though it says sold, people might still think the property is available because they have old information or something, and they get something off of Zillow or whatever. So it just kind of reminds you that, hey, when you buy a property and people are coming up saying, I saw your house is for sale, you know, and you know you just bought it, it's like you can just say no thanks or whatever, go away. But at the end of the day, it wasn't like somebody did something to you or whatever, or tried to like put it out there as listed when it's not. It talks about what assignment looks like and what the rules are around assignment. And then basically there's some just basic definitions. And then down here, everyone's going to sign. I try to fill in all my information, which is already here. All goes in there. And then I'm going to take Melida's information. The only thing I really have for her is her phone number at this point. And I can copy and paste her email address. Okay. And then I'm going to grab her email off of the MLS. I have her address. That's something I need to go back to the document here. Ah, little raccoon. All right, paste. Sorry for the delay. And then I gotta put the right phone number here. I actually took the wrong one by accident. This is the 69 number. All right, well, I hope this has helped you learn how to write an offer, and I'll show you how we're gonna have someone sign it real quick. So we definitely want to talk about our offer with our client. I don't recommend just sending it and like having them e-sign it. This particular client I've written several offers for, so it's not the same. Like we don't have to go over it every time. I know what his parameters are and things like that. I just want to make sure that you definitely kind of use this video as like a tutorial about what to say about the offer to kind of give you a little more information. I really recommend reading the offer and you have understanding. You can always ask me if you have questions or whatever about how to do it. Of course, you can always talk to your broker. I mean, I highly recommend that even over this video. But like if you're struggling and you need some just hand holding and writing your first offer, I hope that this has been a little bit informative for you. So let me go ahead and do an e-sign on this. Oh, remember there's that other document that got in here, so I gotta get out of here. I don't want to do this right now. I want to do that other form. So I'm going to go back up here to all forms because that other FHA form got added into this transaction and they need to finish filling that out. This, back. And then here's that FHA form. So we have to quick fill out that, and then we can attach both of these to our AuthentiSign. So this is the FHA amendatory clause. We dated this offer today. We want to make sure that it doesn't appraised for less than 390,000, even though we already know it did already do that. We're just going to include this disclosure as well. Notice everything was already populated for us. And there's that. So now we're going to go back and we're going to click both of these, and then we're going to hit e-sign. I choose Authentisign these days. I've had DocuSign for like, I don't want to say like 20 some years, but Authentisign really works well with when you're inside the system, and it's real easy for the buyer to sign. So it's brought up our contract. We're going to add participants. I'm going to add me. I'm going to add from transaction actually. I'm going to add Antonio and myself. I can't add the seller and the listing agent. I have to come up with his email address. There we go. I'm going to hit save. And then it's going to automatically, because it knows this, it knows who's supposed to sign what on this particular document. Then I just have to hit send. And it's going to send me an email saying, hey, sign your document. And I open it up and I hit click, 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 and just sign it. And then it goes over to my client and he signs it, and then I'll get a notification later saying it's done. And that's it. I hope you found this video helpful. I made it for you so that it could maybe give you some guidance, and I hope you're having a beautiful day. And feel free to text me at 818-679-3696 if you need some other help. I am licensed, obviously. I'm a broker associate with eXp Realty in California, as well as eXp Realty in Wisconsin. So I can help people in both states. Obviously, the forms in Wisconsin are totally different, but I know how to do those as well. I hope you're having a great day.